Craig, you were a big fan a couple of off seasons ago of the Jets potentially signing that man, Derek Carr. Well, he recently did an interview and detailed just how close he was to joining Gang Green. Here's what Derek Carr had to say, quote, I could have signed with the Jets. It just wasn't the right time for me. There was still like 4 or 5 teams I had to hear from. My brother knew Coach Saleh, and he knew I loved New Orleans, but he was like, you're going to see Saleh. You're probably going to stay. He was thinking I was going to sign because of Saleh.
Yeah.
Going back in time, do you think the Jets ultimately would be better off with Derek Carr
yeah, but only because they'd have him for a longer period of time than they're most likely going to have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron is the far better quarterback. Derek Carr, as good as he is, has never won a playoff game, right? So I'm not comparing him to Aaron Rodgers because he loses that comparison in every metric you can come up with. But I remember being here, and I was on the radio in New York at the time, and I loved Derek Carr, and I would have loved him to be the starting quarterback for the next 4 or 5 years for the New York Jets. We probably would have gotten Davante Adams, by the way. He would have been easier to have gotten a year and a half ago than he is to get now that Antonio Pierce is the head coach of the Raiders. What's amazing about it is that Derek Carr is a very religious guy. And he and his wife are like, thick as thieves when it comes to, their beliefs, their religion, and I respect all that. And he said in this interview that he would have signed with the Jets. The deal was done. They offered the money. It's all good, right? And to this day, he said, after meeting Robert Saleh at an Italian restaurant in Summit, New Jersey, a year and a half ago, that he would still to this day walk through a wall for the guy. That's how impressive Robert Saleh apparently was in this meeting at a Fiorino's in Summit, New Jersey, a well-known Italian restaurant. But he also said that I owed it to myself to at least listen to the 3 or 4 other teams that had expressed an interest in bringing him as a veteran quarterback. And he did have this love affair with the city of New Orleans. And then once he went to New Orleans for the interview, and look, it was a $100+ million deal, so the money was obviously right also. He goes, I've always wanted to be in New Orleans. I want to move my family to New Orleans. This is where I want us to be. It was a done deal. But think about that just for a minute. Had Derek Carr said, you know what? I don't need to go anywhere else. Saleh's my guy. They've got a young stud in Garrett Wilson. They've got a building a really good defense, blah, 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 blah. Think about how much different we'd be talking about the Jets now. Because I would make the argument, well, I can't say they would have won a Super Bowl. That's a playoff team with Derek Carr at quarterback. I don't think anyone would dispute that. And we would look at the Jets a lot differently in what now would be year 2 of Derek Carr. And I do think Davante Adams would more likely be a Jet today had Derek Carr gotten that gig. We would view the Jets so much differently than we do now.
You see how the expectations change? From Derek Carr to Aaron Rodgers. I believe the New York Jets haven't been to a playoff game since what, 2000?
It's a decade plus now, yeah.
2010, I believe. So if Derek Carr becomes the starting quarterback for the New York Jets, all the fans are like, yes, we have a chance to go to the playoffs. But now you have Aaron Rodgers and you're a Super Bowl contender.
You're right. You're right.
So there's a totally different dynamic between the two. And listen, I understand that him and Robert Saleh had a nice dinner in New Jersey. He would run through the wall for a guy, and the deal was basically done. It was a $100+ million deal, just like you said. But when Aaron Rodgers picks up the phone and say, I want to play for the New York Jets, they just threw Derek Carr to the side and be like, you know what? I'd rather have Aaron Rodgers instead of Derek Carr.
Look, he signed the deal beforehand, but obviously they were well aware that they were going down a road with Aaron Rodgers, which is why they allowed him, to also get on a plane, go to New Orleans, and never come back. So I'm with you on that. Like they weren't. It wasn't like Derek Carr went to New Orleans and the Jets started to scramble and said, hey, let's call Green Bay up. They were doing it simultaneously.
No,
You're
but
right.
when Aaron Rodgers picks up the phone and says
You
that
take
I want to be a part of your organization, you take him.
But think about this also, the flip side of this, and Derek mentioned it in the interview he did. He was an unrestricted free agent. So the Jets could have acquired their new franchise quarterback the way New Orleans did and gave up nothing to get him. Whereas they had to give up draft picks, obviously, to go out and get Aaron Rodgers. Now, we all agree Aaron Rodgers is the better quarterback, the more successful quarterback. And what Plax said, you're right. As good as Derek Carr is, and I think that they would have been a wild card team with Derek Carr, worst case scenario, as their starting quarterback, the expectations of Derek Carr, you're dead on, is playoffs.
Playoff team.
The expectation of Aaron Rodgers is we're going to a Super Bowl. And that shows you, even amongst the top 10 quarterbacks, the elite quarterbacks in the league, there's still a huge spread between the top 2 or 3 and the next 5 or 6.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Knowing what you know now about how it played out,
yeah.
with Aaron getting hurt last year and potentially being ready to start this year, would you still rather have Aaron Rodgers?
I always wanted Derek Carr, and so I'm not going to be a hypocrite about it. I want to be very consistent about it. Derek Carr was, as a fan, my number one choice. He's the guy I wanted. I've always liked watching Derek Carr play. I think he's a damn good quarterback. I recognize he has no playoff success at all, and he's been in the league a long time.
Got booed last year.
He's been in the league a long time, and New Orleans wasn't thrilled with the job he did last year.
Got booed.
So in theory, he might have been a disappointment here as well. But I can't go back in time and say that, oh, I always wanted Aaron Rodgers. Because I'll be honest about it. I hated Aaron Rodgers until he became my quarterback. I didn't want him.
Because of what Plaxico said, if I were a Jets fan, I would rather have 1 year of healthy Aaron Rodgers and 1 year of unhealthy Aaron Rodgers than 2 years of healthy Derek Carr.
Oh, I don't. I would take
5 years of a healthy Derek
No.
Aaron
You
Rodgers
just said
brings you
earlier,
Super Bowl
would you
potential.
rather
The
have
voice of the
Aaron
Super
Rodgers
Bowl.
for the two seasons and have the expectations of him basically coming to this team and making him a Super Bowl contender, or would you want to have Derek Carr for 4 or 5 years and say, okay, we have a playoff football?
Yeah, well, you're going to be surprised by this answer. I would take 5 years of Derek Carr than what I've gotten out of Aaron Rodgers. Even my expectations. Because look, I know I compare the Jets a lot to the Rams situation a couple years ago, where the Rams forfeited their future in theory to go get the chip right now. And I would sign up for that 100%. That's Aaron Rodgers, right? I'm trying to get a Super Bowl now, and I recognize that guy's going to retire right after, and now I'm screwed again for the next God knows how many years because I don't have a quarterback. But Derek Carr is a good quarterback, man.
I'm not saying that he's not. I'm not saying that he's not a good quarterback, but he's not Aaron Rodgers either.
No, he's not. But I mean, you asked the question, I answered it. I'll take 5 years of Derek Carr over 1 year of Aaron Rodgers.
Well, you're going to need another quarterback for the next 4 or 5 years after this season because Aaron Rodgers will not be back as
do not send him to Vegas, Plaxico.
You've been doing this all week, Plaxico.
You know why?
He's on a 1 year deal.
Don't forget.
He's on a 1 year deal.
Let me walk you through Plaxico Burress, if I may, pretending like he's not here for a second.
Talk to me.
Plaxico Burress has amazing relationships with guys that are still in the league. He knows stuff. But because he's a man's man, he ain't going to reveal what he knows or talk about stuff that he's been told in private. So he says things, but it's always tinged in the reality that he knows what's going on. That's why
he's on a 1 year deal.
Yeah, which is what Antonio Pierce told you.
He's on a 1 year deal.
Antonio Pierce told Mark Davis, give me 2 years so I can get Aaron Rodgers.
AP never said that to me.
Who did then?
Nobody just said, I just know things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Don't act like he don't talk to people. He talks to a lot of people. And he's a slow golf player, so there's a lot of things he can learn.
A lot of time.
On the golf course. He's like a 6-hour round right there. He's the human rain delay on a golf course. Hey there, thank you so much for watching The Carton Show. You can subscribe right here to get all the latest bits and segments from the show. And by the way, while you're at it, we have a lot of great shows on FS1, so check them out too.